Today I'm going to show you how to weave some ends. So what I'm going to do is take my project that I have here. It's just something that I made recently that isn't really, it didn't work out. So let's just put it that way. I'm going to take that and I'm going to weave in a different colored yarn so you can see exactly where I'm going. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you have the proper size hook. The proper size needle for what you're sewing. Now, the proper size needle means that you don't have to force your needle in. You can put it in there easily. Okay, so I don't have to really force it in. It can just go in there easily. So let's say, for example, we've finished with this piece and we want to weave in our end. So we would have had an end up here. We would have had one down here. This would be our starting point, so there's not going to be an end there. That would be on the inside. And then we would have had one up here. I'm going to show you guys on the side how to weave in an end. So I'm going to pretend that my yarn is coming out of this spot. This is my last slip stitch that I made. This is where I ended the little row on this border right here. So I'm going to pretend that my yarn, I've just finished. I've got my yarn coming out this way and going in that way. I'm going to pretend that that end is not there. So we're going to pretend that this is my yarn end. My yarn end. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to want to hide any knots that I have. So if I've got a knot here or a slip stitch and a chain one and it's kind of bulky, whatever, I'm going to want to pull that slip stitch or knot as tight as possible. And then I'm going to go into the next closest stitch that I can find, or the next closest hole that I can find, which for me, I like going back or down. As you can see here, this little piece of yarn right here, that's where I sewed my end, or I weaved my end. So what I would do is go in here and let it come all the way out the bottom. Now this is if you have a border. So this is just setting my knot. Okay, so I'm going to pull that tight and try and make that knot disappear. And later, when I'm finished with this, I can kind of pull it back out a little bit. That way I know that my end is tight in there and I can put it back into place how I want it. And I don't have to worry about that. So now let's say I've done that. I've brought it all the way out the other side. And I want to go ahead and finish weaving this end in. I want it to be secure. I don't want it to ever come out. I want you to be able to play with this toy and wash it if you need to. So what I'm going to do now, instead of going into a stitch, now this is by choice completely. You can just continue going in and out of the closest hole that you can find a little bit. That's what's really going to lock in your weave. So what I like to do, instead of going completely back inside, is I like to catch one of these loops down here for one of these from one of the single crochets that I did. So I like to weave my ends through my stitches, not in and out of my work, The in and out of my work is going to be the last couple that I do. So I'm going to pull that through and I'm going to pull it nice and tight so that it disappears. And if this were the proper color, I promise you it would disappear. Okay. So now that I've done that, I will go into the next closest hole. I know that I said that I would do a couple of those single crochet things first, but for this project in particular, and you can keep doing that. You can do that a couple of times and just go along the row a little bit. So like if I were to keep going, I would go along the row and go under this next one, which I can't do because mine in particular, this one is just very tight right there. But I would go in through the next and I would do just a couple of those. What I'm going to show you now is how I would finish it. So I would do that. I would go through a couple and then I would come down and go through again. So I'm going to go through. I'm going all the way through this time. And I'm going to poke it out, you know, a few stitches away, maybe 5, 6. Not too many because you don't want to catch too much stuffing. Alright, so now I've got my end that has gone through several places. It's starting to lock in more. You know, you can't pull this through anymore. That's the lock in. Okay. So now I've gone and done that one time, I'm going to go down either below or above. So depending on where you want to go, and I'm going to go in again and do that one more time. What other tutorials like to say a lot, which I do believe in this, is doing that a few times in a few different directions to kind of get that locked in. So I just went over one stitch right here, so it will blend in perfectly. You won't be able to notice that it's an end at all. It will just blend in with the rest of it. I'm going to do that another time, and I'm going to go back a different direction so that you get that extra kind of feeling of the lock in there. Don't pull it too tight. You just want to pull it tight enough to where that piece of yarn lays on the stitch normally, so where it should look completely like a completely normal stitch when you pull it tight. You don't want to pull it too tight. You want it to look normal, just like the rest of your pieces of yarn do in your single crochets. And you can do this as many times as you want, as many times as makes you feel comfortable. If you feel like this is going to be an extra played with toy, you can weave that end in all day if you want. So I'm going to do a different technique here. What I'm going to do is go under through one of my single crochets again. So I'm just picking up one piece of yarn, maybe two. I'm not going all the way through. As you can see, I've only gone through a couple pieces of yarn on the very top. So the very top part of that single crochet, right there. And I'm pulling my yarn through it. That will make it disappear because it will go on the inside of your stitch. So it's not going to be on the inside of this whole thing. It's just going to be between your strands of yarn inside the stitch. And you can do that along your row a few times and then turn around again and put it through a whole stitch again and lock it in even more. So I'm going to put it into that, wherever that closest hole is. I'm going to put it in and I'm going to bring it out a few stitches above it or below it or beside it, wherever you want. And that pretty much hides that whole piece of yarn. And if this were the same color as the rest of my cup, you wouldn't be able to tell I was doing any of this. So if you were to try and pull this out, there's just no way it could happen. It's weaved in so many times. That yarn has full grip on there. I could probably put a keychain on here and that could be my keychain to hold this big heavy cup. So the more you weave it in, the more times you weave it in, the more sturdy it's going to be. And make sure you obviously don't make a mess of your work. Be constantly aware of your details and where all your details are and how thick things are and things like that. You want things to lay flat and not look any higher than anything else. So you want that to look completely normal. And that's how you weave in an end. And once you're finished, the only thing that you would do, you want to finish on one like this where your yarn is coming out of the middle of a stitch. It's coming out of an actual, stitch. So what you're gonna do is pull that tight to where it indents a little bit, and when you cut it, it'll pop inside. So I just cut that and it popped back in. Couldn't even tell you which hole it came from. I think it was that one. So that popped right back in there. And that's your end. You can pretty much apply this to any amigurumi project, any clothing project, pretty much any crochet project, just in general. So I hope you guys learned a lot. I hope I was able to help. And I'll send me a like and some comments too. That would be great. Subscribe. I would really love that. So, yeah. I'll see you guys later.